Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I'll be analysing and reviewing games using the mindset of speedrunning. This video will look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people will first play the game. This will look like a condensed standard review. Next we'll discuss the speedrun experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. Finally, we'll look at the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description. Today we're looking at Sonic Blast, which is a very late release for the Sega Game Gear and Master System, and it's the fourth kind of platformer Sonic game on those consoles. If you end up enjoying this video, then subscribing to the channel would be really appreciated. I'm hoping to grow the channel more and put out regular videos, and subscriptions always help out. At its heart, Sonic Blast is a pretty normal Sonic game. It's got 5 zones, all with 3 acts each, and there's a boss at the end of each one. You can get your best ending by getting all the Chaos Emeralds going to special stages. It's a pretty welcome addition to the Sonic franchise, really. I played it for the first time on Sonic Mega Collection Plus out on the PlayStation 2, and that was a compilation of a whole bunch of Sonic games. That's also where I played Sonic Chaos for the first time and Sonic 3 on the Genesis for the first time. Now, one of the first things you'll notice about this game is the unique graphical style. It's gone for a pre-rendered graphics approach, much like Donkey Kong Country did on the Super Nintendo. And what that means is the models were rendered in 3D and then compressed down to 2D sprites, and it gives it sort of a shiny 3D look, which is much more advanced than anything else that was out on the Game Gear at the time. Now, this came out 2 years after Donkey Kong Country. It came out in 1996. And this pre-rendered graphics approach makes it look so much more advanced than any other games that were out in 1996. It looks really beautiful. This 3D effect is expanded upon in the special stages of the game. This is where you go if you want to get all the Chaos Emeralds, all 5 of them in this game, never mind about the other 2. And it's sort of got this 3D effect, it's really cool. It makes it incredibly difficult to grab the rings because you have no depth perception, but it looks really cool. If you manage to get at least 50 rings in a special stage, you'll get the Chaos Emerald at the end, and if you get all 5 of those, you unlock a secret final boss and the best ending to the game. So they're definitely worth going for, and it makes it a bit more interesting. To actually find the special stages, you search for hidden rings in the level. Act 1 of a zone, you'll get an extra life from a special stage, and Act 2 you'll get the emerald, so it's only really worth looking for them in Act 2. In fact, the game is so keen on you finding the special stages that it tells you to look with an exclamation mark before each zone, just in case you forgot you were supposed to be looking for something. Now, one cool thing about this game is you do have a choice of playable characters, as the title screen might suggest. When you start up the game, you can pick to play as either Sonic or Knuckles. So they're pretty similar, but there are a few key differences in their movesets. Sonic has a double jump, so if you jump, you can press jump again in the air and you'll get this little sparkly jump which gets some more height. In my opinion, that's much better than Knuckles' glide, but it comes down to your personal preference. Sonic can spin dash and so can Knuckles, but Sonic's spin dash does go a little bit faster than Knuckles does. Knuckles is pretty similar to Sonic, but you essentially have that slower spin dash and just swap out your double jump for a glide ability instead. And that glide is pretty cool because you can latch to walls and climb up and down it just like Knuckles in the other games. So you would think Knuckles would be slower for a speedrun, but he does have one advantage, and that comes to bosses. Normally with bosses you end up jumping back off them and recoiling really fast. With Knuckles' glide you can quickly glide back at the boss and then hit the boss a second time. So that can make bosses a bit quicker with Knuckles, but then generally levels are a bit quicker with Sonic, so it's a bit of a trade-off that you get there. Now I need to address the elephant in the room in this game. The physics are not good. So I'll demonstrate here what I mean, and basically the issue is you turn around really slowly. So you can probably see me when I'm pressing left or right to turn around, and it takes a really long time after you press that to fully turn around and slow down. And this is even worse when you're underwater, which some sections of the game involve, because those water physics, they're really slow. In fact, the way they program the water in this game is it doesn't actually slow down the character at all, it literally just halves the frame rate of the game when you're in the water, so everything feels sluggish when you're under here. So even with that physics in mind, you really just have to try and not slow down at all and make the most of the physics. If you can get past it, there is a good experience under here, even if it is kind of crippled by the physics engine. And you'll also have to get past the fact that 1/5 of the game is a water level, which is really not fun. It makes the slow physics even more slow. But that being said, the exploration part can be fun, and I have a great deal of nostalgia for this game because it was included on that Mega Collection Plus compilation. So this game's got a pretty good speed community for a Game Gear Master System game, and what actually got me interested in it was looking at this run from GDQ that happened earlier this year. I was always a bit interested in the game before it, but had always held off because there was already a pre-existing TAS of it that was pretty good, and the RTA world record seemed pretty optimized. But I saw this run and it sparked my curiosity, so that's what started me looking into it. I haven't found too much that's absolutely huge in the game, but I did find a nice little 7-second time save, which I'll talk about later. So just looking at the leaderboards here, you can see that quite a few people have tried running this game. It's broken up into two main categories. There's the Sonic category and the Knuckles category. So each of those categories then is broken further down into Beat the Game and Best Ending. Hypnotics seems to rule the Knuckles category, and recently in the last few weeks I have grinded for world record in both Sonic categories. So I've got that 1322, and also I've got a 2219 in Best Ending, although it's not verified quite yet. So I'll be focusing mainly on the Sonic category today, mainly just because I'm more familiar with that one, but both categories are pretty similar, just with Knuckles taking on the bosses a little bit faster. Just a heads up that the speedrunning section will unavoidably have some spoilers in it. I'll try and keep everything pretty much chronological, so the end of the game should fall towards the end of the speedrunning section. So before launching straight into the speedrun, I should talk about how building up speed and keeping speed works in this game. If you try and run just to the right, it's going to be really slow to gain or lose speed, but you can just spin dash to get yourself straight up to a speed of 4. I've got the speed watch in the top left corner there, so you can keep an eye on that to see how fast I'm going. Anyway, you want to spin dash and get up to 4, and then eventually if you roll down a hill, it'll go higher than 4, because Sonic goes downhill and gains speed. Now, you'll immediately start losing speed if you're on the ground, so actually what's better is to spin dash and jump straight out of it, and then your speed sort of just hovers around the same value until you hit the ground again. Now, if you let the speed hover around this valley, that'll be really great, but if you hit the ground again, you're going to lose that speed pretty much instantly. I'll show you what that looks like. So jumping, 3DE, and then it snaps down to 380 straight away. But you can keep this speed by jumping and then holding down and rolling when you land, and then you just won't lose that speed at all. You'll lose a little bit for each frame you're on the ground, but if you can jump straight out of it again, you'll actually keep quite a bit of that speed. And that's a really good strategy for maintaining it. Not to mention, if you go around a loop, you'll come out of it pretty much with 4 or 5 speed from that loop, so that's really good for keeping it. The general strategy of this game is to keep doing jumps, keep jumping on the ground, holding down to roll so that you don't lose your speed, and then jumping out of that and just being airborne for as much as possible. If you time it really well, then each time you hit the ground you can actually gain a little bit of speed. It's just a bit odd how it works, but pretty much you can gain just that tiny bit of speed until you hit a cap of 5, and you don't even need to be rolling downhill to do that. But that being said, in an RTA setting, it's kind of hard to do that frame perfectly each time, so more often than not, what the best strategy is just to do really big jumps and not hit the ground at all, as much as you can avoid it. So keep that in the back of your mind as we look at the run, because that's going to be basically what the whole run is hinged on. Doing a spin dash to get a really quick speed boost, increasing that speed boost by rolling down hills, and doing big jumps to avoid losing any of that speed. So the run we'll be looking at today is my current world record, sitting at 1322. I was pretty happy with this run. It had bad RNG, which we'll talk about later, but pretty good execution. You'll see immediately what's going to happen is I'm going to spin dash, roll down the hill, and jump to maintain speed. Then I'll do a loop to get an even bigger speed boost and just keep jumping up to the end of the level. So I meticulously plan out every single jump in the level and know exactly where I'm going to land, and that helps me maintain speed and hit a lot of downhill sections and avoid a lot of uphill sections. I'm going to stop right here and point out the signpost. That was Eggman, which is really good because the levels snap straight to the total screen and you can just go on your merry way. But depending on your signpost luck, it might be really good or really bad. In level 2 we see another example of signpost luck, getting a ring here, which is fairly common. That ring is as fast as an Eggman, but it gives you 10 rings, which makes this bonus screen take longer, and since that's part of the timing, it's actually not as good to get a ring as it is to get an Eggman. Another example of bad signpost luck is Supersonic. Keep an eye on my ring counter here because it'll snap from 20 up to 50 when I get it, and also there's a really big jingle when you get Supersonic on the sign that slows down the level fade out. So this run had a lot of those really bad signpost luck moments, but the gameplay was really good, and that's why I was so happy with this. Even though it was only a 7-second PB, it was much more than 7 seconds better in terms of gameplay. A big strategy in this run are killing bosses quickly. So I get 2 hits in on that, and then I keep getting hit after hit on it. You can see that it bounces Sonic back to the left really far and really fast whenever you hit him, so that's where Knuckles would save a bit of time on this boss here. But that's about as quickly as you can kill that one. Most levels are just straight up solid platforming like this, trying to roll down hills, so I won't dwell on them too much. Technically it is a little bit faster to avoid rings since it makes the total screens go faster, but it's not usually worth it in practice to do that. This level in particular has a really cool section where you can go really fast after you fall down here. This is one of my favourite parts of the run, but also one of the easier parts to mess up. As soon as you take damage, you're going to lose all your speed and it's going to be really slow. There, Sonic almost outruns the screen, and you actually have to be really careful not to hit the edge of the screen there. Of course, at the end of this level I got a Chaos Emerald on the sign, which loses about 3 or 4 seconds. The boss for Zone 2 is pretty cool. You can usually get 2 hits off on this bit, and then you get 3 hits by spin dashing at him when he's coming in from this side. So it's really hard to do optimally, but if you can do it, you can get it on the right cycle. Because I'll get 3 hits here, then the last 2 to kill him here. If I was 1 hit short, then I'd have to wait for him to come back in from the right side of the screen there. Red Volcano 1 I unfortunately messed up really badly in this run, and it's such a shame because it's one of my favourite levels when done right, but this was just atrocious. Probably one of the biggest mistakes in the run. Red Volcano 2 is actually a level that is a little bit faster with Knuckles, and you'll see why in a second here. Sonic has to spin dash up these blue platform things to rise them up and get correct jumps up here, but Knuckles can usually just glide up and climb the walls really quickly. Red Volcano 3 has one of the more technical platforming sections in the run. You've got to turn around really quickly here on these jumps and make sure you don't fall down anywhere. It's actually one of the hardest bits of the run and was one of the hardest bits to do when I did the TAS of this game as well. When we get up to the boss, we're going to see various hits on the boss, one when the boss comes up and another when the boss comes down. It's really easy to take damage on the hit when the boss is coming down. If you mistime your spin dash there, you will take damage. So that actually makes this boss a pretty scary part of the run. If you take too much damage and lose your rings, then it's not really worth going for that hit again because you might die. Luckily I get it optimally here. Now coming up is 4-1 and it's got one of the biggest skips in the run. I found this skip while doing the TAS and it saves about 7 seconds. It saves you having to ride a particular water current all the way to the left. So it's a pretty precise setup, but I was really happy that it was possible RTA. It also seems to be only possible with Sonic. But basically what you want to do is you want to jump out to the right here and then do a really careful jump to the left, leave right, do a double jump, and then come in through this pipe. That current would pull you away if you miss that jump at all or go too far or too short, so it's really precise. And then straight after this is another one of the harder tricks in the run, which is getting a pipe jump out of this pipe. If you hit jump on the frame that you come out, then you can jump out of that and jump up to this section, which is where you need to go. If you miss that jump, then Sonic's going to fall down. You're going to lose probably 5, 6, 7 seconds, something like that. 4-2 is one of the longer levels in the speedrun. It does have one more pipe jump that we'll see in the TAS, but we don't see in RTA just because it's a bit too difficult. But most of this is just underwater, a very slow movement. At the end of 4-2 we have another pipe jump here. If you miss that, you probably lose over 10 seconds, so it's really important to get that. Luckily that is the easiest out of the pipe jumps, and of course we got more bad signpost luck just to top it off. 4-3 has an underwater boss, and that boss is actually really brutal. You can die if you run out of air, even after you beat the boss, so you got to be really careful with this one. I'm doing this strat, which is about 4 seconds slower than the optimal strat, but it's a lot safer than the optimal strat. This boss is pretty tense, and I'd love to integrate the optimal strat one day, but it's just too hard to do consistently in a run. So I get another hit off here, and then I should get 2 more here and beat the boss. Unfortunately I missed that one, so I have to jump back up and hit him, and you can see that air counter ticking down. This is one of the most tense moments in the run, because if it hits the bottom of 0 before the level fades out, I'm dead. And you can see it hits 0 before the level fades out. So if I was just maybe like half a second slower on getting that last hit in, I would have died and the run would have been over. Last level is Silver Castle, and the other fun part about this game is all the levels are named after a colour. This is one of the more technical levels, and there's a lot of enemies that can sort of get in your way here. So Silver Castle 1 and 2 can be the most time saved or lost in a run, just because it's so big and so long and technical. Silver Castle 2 has a big lot of damage boosting at the start. We'll go through these lasers here, and then we go through up this section and try and avoid the yellow floors, which slow us down. It's really easy to get hit by enemies down here and not have the camera scroll all the way down. For some reason I spin dashed the wrong direction and hit that spike wall. But yeah, you have to just remember where the enemies are, and then it's okay once you do that. Silver Castle also has this section where you have to light up all those lights by rotating these platforms. It's pretty tricky to get right without losing a bunch of time on it. Silver Castle 3 is one of the longest levels in the game. Here it is. Done. But that brings you to the final boss. Now the final boss here is pretty funky. You've got to look at what side he's on and get the platform over to the right side. But you actually have to move the platform in advance. So if you see Robotnik move and you start moving the platform towards him, you won't be fast enough if you do that. You actually have to start moving the platform towards him in advance, and then if you don't see him move, backtrack and stop moving the platform. There's also a lovely stray pixel on this boss, kind of near the bottom right of it, so sorry for pointing that out, it's pretty awful. This boss can do a fake out shot as well, so you got to watch out for those, and if you do that you do lose a bit of time, probably like 3 or 4 seconds. It also throws off your timing for moving the platform the right way, so it is a pretty tense way to end the run. Usually you don't save or lose any or much time at all on this boss, but if it goes wrong it can go really badly wrong. But that's pretty much it for this run. I was pretty happy with it with a 1322. It still come down a little bit more, but the gameplay I thought was really good in this run, except for 3-1 really. I'll briefly mention what the 100% run looks like. It's pretty much the same, but it involves these special stages. Honestly, I'm not overly keen on it because it's pretty much just any percent, but you add a bunch of auto-scrollers. But I thought I've got the any percent record, so I might as well put a bit of time into 100% and have a go at it. It is fun, and it is fun finding the rings to get to the special stages, but the auto-scroller, really long special stages that are easy to mess up just kind of ruins it a little bit. Now the other cool part about running 100% is that you have this secret extra boss at the end, and this boss only happens if you have all 5 of the Chaos Emeralds. The premise of this boss is you got to jump on the yellow button and then hit the top of the boss to deal damage. You can also damage boost through the boss and get quite a few hits in all at once. Now in this run I had this first attempt at the boss and I did okay, but I was taking a lot of damage. You'll notice it goes into phase 2 pretty soon, where the platform down the bottom is going to start moving, and then it's pretty much the same strategy from there, you just have a moving platform to worry about. So there you go, you can see it moving along. But something really weird happens in this run, so I'm going to keep dealing hits on the boss, and eventually the boss's sprite is going to glitch out, and then the platform will stop moving. Normally when you finish and hit the boss with the last hit, you're supposed to defeat the boss, but I didn't there for whatever reason. Now the platform stopped moving, and it seems like no matter how many more hits I get in, I'm not going to beat the boss, and I ended up dying. I had to actually redo the boss again here, which was pretty frustrating because it was a really good run up to that point. So I think what happened there is I actually underflowed the boss's health. I haven't looked too much into it, but I'm pretty sure if you deal too many extra hits on the boss as it's dying, you'll roll it over to a negative number, which the game interprets as really positive, and then the boss just has heaps of health and you can't beat it. A similar glitch can happen in Sonic 1 on the Genesis. So that was a bit frustrating and an unfortunate way to end the run, but then I killed the boss pretty quickly after that, so it doesn't matter too much. So apart from that, this run is really solid and pretty optimized, but I just had the death against the boss there. I actually tried to do a few more runs after this one to improve it, but I wasn't able to get any better runs than this one here. It's still very improvable though because of that death on the boss. So overall, I wouldn't recommend this game too much casually, but I would really recommend it quite a bit as a speed game. I got really used to the physics and it was fun to try and optimize it and squeeze it out within the constraints of what the game gives you. And in fact, when I went back and played Sonic 1 on the Master System after this, it felt really wrong how quickly I turned around, and I thought my controller was broken or something. So you do adjust to the bad physics, so to speak. So if you're thinking about picking up a Sonic game, I think it would definitely be a fun one to give a try. So now let's have a look at the Taz. You'll notice immediately this Taz doesn't go around the loop, and that's because every time I land Sonic on the ground, you can gain more speed in a jump. So I originally looked at this Taz when I looked at the GDQ run to try and figure out what was going on with the game, and there was an existing Taz. It was about an 1130 by Challenger. Part of the reason why I didn't Taz it beforehand is because I know Challenger did a really good job optimizing it, and most of the time save I got here came from that time save in 4-1. But you can see with the Taz, the movement is really tight, and rather than trying to be in the air a lot, I'm actually trying to be on the ground a lot, because every time I can get on the ground, I improve my speed just a tiny little bit. But there's lots of complex dynamics going on here. It's pretty much the same as RTA, but just way more optimized. One thing that I'll mention is I can get perfect signpost luck in the Taz just by manipulating the RNG. All you have to do is wait for a different amount of time and you'll get different results. So it's usually best to get the Robotnik sign or the ring sign, because the ring sign doesn't lose much time at all. But if you can get the Robotnik sign without losing too much time, it's usually worth it to do so. If you're familiar with RTA, some of these Taz boss fights will look pretty crazy. You can hold into the wall and then swap to right, which will manage your speed a bit better, and it's just a little bit faster than what you can normally do in RTA consistently. Now the section I showed before in this room gets even crazier in the Taz, because it basically never loses speed. It can build up so much here, and it has to really carefully slow down to avoid touching the edge of the screen there. Pretty fast section. Because Taz has a lot more control, it can ride the down ramps a lot better in levels. So I'm really carefully timing jumps to hit pretty much every down ramp section that I can with no up ramp sections. This kind of movement would be a bit too precise to pull off RTA without some crazy setups. One cool thing that I found in the Taz was a faster way to do the start of Red Volcano 2. It's actually faster to go up above this section than below, otherwise you have to damage boost through some of the lava. The hard part is avoiding those steam vents though. Now this level is where some of the really technical sides of the Taz show. There's a lot of jumping and bonking on walls to preserve speed and a lot of tight jumps. With these sections in RTA, normally you would let the platforms rise up a little bit more, but Taz just jumps pretty much as early as possible while still being able to make it. Red Volcano 3 is one of the more crazy technical parts of the Taz. I bonk on walls to reduce my speed to 0, and that saves me spending a lot of time turning around. Normally in RTA you'll just have to hold left or right to turn around, but when you bonk on walls to lose your speed, it's just so much faster. The boss fight's going to look pretty similar, only I'm going to get an extra hit on that first bit, so that's a little bit faster than RTA. Making this Taz is where I found the skip in Blue Marine Zone Act 1, and it's going to look a little bit faster than what we were able to do in RTA. I'm going to jump right off just this bit instead, and go straight through this section. So that's obviously a lot harder to do because you don't have the speed build up, but in a Taz you have the precision needed to make that possible. And then from there the level looks pretty much the same, only of course these pipe jumps are guaranteed because you always make perfect moves in a Taz. Blue Marine 2 has this other pipe jump that I was talking about, and this is going to be one of the most realistic things that we could still put in RTA. So it's right here, you got to get this jump out the bottom, and if you miss that jump you get pulled away by the current. So this pipe jump does save a lot of time, but it's pretty tricky to pull off. I would suspect that it's going to be possible in RTA soonish. The Taz can also do kind of cool things like spin dashing into these pipes. It just saves a little bit of time over RTA like that. And it gets the optimal jumps off those sections too. The Taz is also able to beat this boss much faster than RTA ever could. So you actually get 3 hits in on this bit, and actually, sorry, 4 hits in on this bit. And then we're going to get more hits in here. So at this point RTA would only have about 4 hits, but Taz has already got most of the hits needed to beat the boss there. That saves a lot of time. Now Silver Castle in a Taz is a bit more optimized, and the reason for that is in RTA you're spending so much time trying to avoid enemies that you don't have a lot of time to really optimize your speed management and go fast. But with the Taz that's not much of a concern. I spend a lot of time with these spike walls because they don't trigger moving until the camera's in a really specific spot and as far down as it can be. So the movement can look a bit funky near those walls because I'm trying to manipulate it so the walls move quickly rather than me necessarily move quickly. Silver Castle 2 is similar, it's pretty hectic. I had these cool spike boost strats here. It was actually as fast as going the top route, but every time you jump under one of those spikes, you're hitting the ground and jumping again, which means your speed cap increases. So it was a fun little strat to include in the Taz. You can often manage your speed here and avoid losing it, whereas in RTA you'll often bonk something and slow down pretty badly here. Now I had to spend a bit of time manipulating the last boss on this Taz to avoid getting any dummy shots or anything. Now the funny thing about Tazes is they actually finish timing on the last input of the Taz. And what that means is as soon as I'm done pressing buttons, I can stop the timer for the Taz. And that happens well before the end of this boss fight. So I manipulate it so that the last few hits are on the same side for this boss, and that means I don't need to move the platform at all after I've set up Robotnik on that side. So the only amount that I was ever able to get was 3 hits on the same side in a row. So what you'll see at the end of this fight is that the very last 3 hits are all on the same side. And that saves me from needing to do different inputs after that to move the platform back across. So it's a fun little time saver for the Taz, but it also means that the timing for this Taz works a little bit differently to RTA timing. So you have to always do adjustments to make it work. Now, one other thing that you might be wondering is whether Sonic or Knuckles is actually faster, and I've been working on a Knuckles Taz to try and nail down and answer this question. As we can see, Sonic is generally a bit faster in level 1 and level 2 of each zone, and that means Sonic there may have saved about just less than a second over Knuckles and so on. But when you come to the bosses, Knuckles gets time back there. So in zone 1, it looks like Sonic is maybe 115 frames faster, or just about 2 seconds, and then when you come to the boss, Knuckles saves about 1.5. So it's a bit of a back and forth wrestling trade-off, but it turns out that I'm actually up to the end of World 3 on the Knuckles Taz, and I'm a little bit faster than Sonic at the moment with Knuckles. So that's about 113 frames faster, or about 2 seconds faster so far. So I still need to finish off that Knuckles Taz and get to the end of the game. But it looks like at the moment Knuckles could be just that tiniest bit faster, which is actually amazing considering Knuckles' spin dash is a lot slower than Sonic's, and the only time that you really get back is time fighting the bosses. So although this Taz is a bit of a work in progress, I will show some footage of it here. You'll notice in this section there is some pretty cool climbing stuff going on with Knuckles here. And especially once we get across the lava here, you'll see Knuckles rebound off each wall and climb this section really quickly. That's a lot faster than what Sonic can do with Spin Dash, so it's really fun. But that being said, there are a lot of sections where Knuckles is slower because you don't have the double jump and you do have the slower Spin Dash. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, and you should definitely keep your eye out for when this Taz is released. Knuckles can also climb the walls in Red Volcano Zone 3 a lot quicker, so he saves a lot of time on this level. And we'll see a boss at the end of this section too, and you'll notice pretty quickly that Knuckles is very good against bosses, and that's where he saves most of the time. So that's going to be pretty much it for this review. I hope you enjoyed having a look at this obscure Sonic game. It's not the best Sonic game in the world, but it does have its charm, and once you get into the speed side of things, you get kind of used to the janky physics. It's been a really fun one to pick up, and I would recommend it if you're interested in some of the more obscure side of Sonic games. I should have more videos coming out like this soon, so if you enjoyed this content, then a subscription would always be appreciated so you can keep up to date, and I hope you really enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.